If you've ever asked yourself what would a hybrid of Nikki Sixx and Horace Pinker from Shocker would be like, well now you don't have to. A deceased demonic 80s rock star is summoned through a cursed vinyl record, and he's on the revenge path on 80s yuppie bullies. Tune into a horror movie written from the mind of Tipper Gore in Trick or Treat. Hello there, you loose units, and welcome back to another episode of Spicy Boy Rewind Reviews, where we go back and have a look at a cult classic through fresh eyes. And today we are looking at the 1986 released Trick or Treat, directed here by Charles Martin Smith, primarily known for being an actor starring in films like American Graffiti and The Untouchables, but this movie being his feature film debut. He has since gone on to direct a whole bunch of TV shows and movies, but most notably directing the film Air Bud. We meet the real Eddie Munson, a high school outcast who's obsessed with heavy metal and is best friends with a young Jeffrey Dahmer. This is 80s high school, so you know these two are profusely bullied. However, if this was modern day American high school, one look at these two walking down the hallways and you would pray that these two don't rock up to school one day in ankle-length leather jackets. Of course, Eddie is bullied by the archetype bully that ever bullied in 80s cinema, Johnny Lawrence Light and the Cobra Kai crew. You may recognise this young blonde yuppie douchebag as a young Doug Savant from Desperate Housewives fame. Eddie is absolutely obsessed with one non-specific rock star by the name of Sammi Curr, who's a cross between Nikki Sixx and the effeminate lover of Vernon Wells' character in Mad Max 2. Eddie's dreams almost came true as Sammi Curr was scheduled to perform live at his local school dance, as we learn that Sammi Curr comes from the same hometown. But the parents of America are having none of it! Before they made Dee Snider take the stand, they deny Sammy from rotting their kids' brains and they cancel the concert, so their kids can go and live on a more wholesome life of eating processed food, having premarital sex, and enjoying a lifestyle of sexism, how Jesus intended. To pour salt on the wound, Eddie learns that Sammi Curr has recently perished in a hotel fire. So unfortunately there's absolutely no chance that Eddie can see his hero perform live in concert. Honestly though, death by fire is a pretty weak excuse to get out of a concert. That would never happen with bands like Motley Crue or Kiss to tour and make some money. I'm pretty sure those two bands have been dead for about 15 years now, and they've already had 10 retirement tours between the two of them, and still counting. And speaking of Kiss, Eddie's only other friend in this small town is none other than Gene Simmons, who plays a local radio DJ. Good old Gene takes some time out between rooting chicks half of his age and informs Eddie that there's one final record that Sammi Curr recorded before his death. And wouldn't you know it, Gene just so happens to have the only copy and hands it to Eddie. He tells Eddie that on Halloween night at midnight he is going to play live on air a copy of the record, obviously in honour of Sammy being his hometown. That's a very specific setup right there. I wonder if this will come back to play in some climactic scene at the end. Anyway, Eddie goes home and plays the record and learns that if he plays the record backwards, he summons the spirit of Sammi Curr. And then Sammy goes on a revenge spree on behalf of Eddie. Eddie starts to get a bit of swagger and a bit of confidence around school because he knows the evil spirit of Sammy has his back. And Sammy's using his poltergeist ways to get back at the 80s yuppies on behalf of Eddie. This is until Sammy goes a little bit too far and assaults Johnny Lawrence Light's girlfriend in the backseat of his car, with a Ghostbusters animated Me Too reenactment. So now Eddie's having none of it! But Pandora's box has already been opened and Sammy is on the hunt for more blood, using his Raiden powers to travel between TVs and stereos, murdering whoever he sees fit. It's now up to Eddie and his crush Leslie to destroy all copies of Sammi Curr's Possessed album. Let's just hope there's not a copy around somewhere that's going to be planned on Halloween at midnight on many, many radios around the small town. If you couldn't tell, this movie is perfect 80s cheese. It's a little slow to get into, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it takes its time to sort of establish a town, a handful of cliche characters, but it's about the halfway point that the film really gets in gear and the fun ensues. It's obvious that the filmmakers took inspiration from the satanic panic that was happening at the time. It's really visually dark to look at too, like it was John Carpenter filmed in daylight. Of course, there's some over-the-top acting, absolute cliche characters, and all the hair you can tease. Ozzy Osbourne even pops up for a cheeky cameo as a reverend, taking some time out in between doing lines of coke. Of course, they offered the role of Sammy Kerr to many different rock stars at the time. But ultimately, the role went to professional dancer and actor Tony Fields, who unfortunately passed away in 1995. Oddly enough, around about the time that 80s heavy metal was truly dead. Mark Price plays Eddie here, our protagonist, and he was most known at the time for playing a reoccurring character on the sitcom Family Ties, playing nerdy Erwin Skippy Hendelman. The music is, of course, a magnificent mix of tracks that sound like Wasp and Rat. And oddly enough, Wasp frontman Blackie Lawless was actually the closest to being cast as Sammy Kerr. And when you look at the design of the character, you can bloody see why. The film is the epitome of 80s horror glorious cheese. There's no real gore in the film, I must say. However, the positive is that 1 hour and 40 runtime. The film is kind of like a mashup between Shocker and, oddly enough, Monster Squad. Like I said, this is good cheesy fun. Fantastic for a movie marathon, but good just to go back and have a look at the lameness of the 80s, especially the hair metal scene. Anyway guys, that's my cheeky little review of cult classic Trick or Treat. I do recommend it. But anyway, write down below if you've seen it, if you're a fan of it, but more importantly, what is your favourite metal-themed horror movie? And of course, if you've made it this far into the episode, please give me a thumbs up because your love and support keeps me going because I just love movies and I assume you do as well. And of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe icon because I give it an episode weekly. And I'll see you back here next week for the next review, but until then, stay spooky, kids.